in a Digital World, the Google Hangout edition. This is our first Google Hangout. My name is Aric Rindfleisch. I'm a marketing professor here at the University of Illinois. And at Illinois, one of probably our main color, our main school color is orange, so I have my orange t-shirt on, and behind me are orange walls of my office. And I'd like to welcome participants from Marketing in a Digital World. For those viewing this broadcast who aren't in the course, let me just say a few words about what this course is all about. So Marketing in a Digital World is a course that's offered on Coursera as part of a broader specialization on digital marketing, which has a number of courses, and this is the first. This course was launched about 2 months ago, and since then we've had a tremendous reception from our learners. We have, at this point, as of today, June 24th, 108,000 visitors, 38,000 learners, nearly 1,300 graduates. And according to the folks at Coursera, this is the second most popular on-demand course in their portfolio, and they have nearly 150 of them. And also we have a really special distinction of having the most active discussion forum of any Coursera class, at least based on my knowledge. And right now we have over 260 pages of discussion forums. So this class is really a great example of collaborative learning, and I think what makes it really interesting, especially for me, is the fact that we're all learning from each other through not just the material that we're presenting here at Illinois, but also from our wonderful learners across the world. And we have people from over 200 different countries. And I have here today, we've asked 3 of our most active learners, 3 recent graduates from the course to join us. So I'd like to ask them to say a few words about themselves. So we have Gabe, Josh, and Prakash. So perhaps, Gabe, could you go first?
Sure. Hello, everyone. My name is Gabe Fig, F-I-G. I am a recent MBA graduate. I finished up in May of this year. In recent years, I've been working in higher education, specifically for-profit education. In my last role, I had the opportunity to be a community manager for our online institution. So it was a lot of engagement, actually, really with our students. So it was a very wonderful experience, but there was a steep learning curve for me, and so I enrolled in this specialization in this course primarily to try to understand better ways I can engage with students both now and also in the future, and it's been tremendously helpful thus far.
Okay, thank you, Gabe. How about you, Josh?
Hello, everyone. Thanks, Professor. Josh Penzel. I live in Brooklyn, New York, by way of Texas, Houston, Texas, to be specific. I'm currently the Director of Faculty and Training for a communication skills training company, and I come there by sort of an interesting path by way of theater. And I actually pursued graduate studies and got my MFA in directing. I've directed several shows in New York off-Broadway, and somehow in this prismatic world I ended up bringing those skills into corporate settings. And now as I move more into management, project management, and marketing, and taking a larger sort of piece of the action in my company, I really wanted to add to the portfolio of skills. And that's how I found myself in this course, and it's been really exciting. So. And thanks for having me here, too.
Great, thank you, Josh. And last but not least, Prakash. Well, I think we've lost Prakash. Hopefully we can get him back online. So we have a number of questions were posted here on Google Hangout by our learners, and I'd like to address some of them, but before we do that, I thought I would ask a question of our learners here, the ones participating in this Hangout. So first of all, as an instructor, we're always curious what is what we're saying having any effect on the people who are listening. So I'd like to get some thoughts from our learners here, what they found to be most interesting or most useful, most surprising of the different concepts that we've covered here in marketing in a digital world. Gabe, are there anything that you'd like to chat about in terms of concepts?
Well, for me, I think it's really been social media marketing. I've seen some of the profound differences that it's making, both in terms of my own job and plus in some of the research that I've done. I mean, I've seen statistics that say that social media marketing as a percentage of marketing budgets is going to grow anywhere from 50 to 75% just between now and the year 2020. And so for me, understanding that growth, I'm thinking, well, that's going to be a driver for my industry, no question. I mean, the higher education landscape has become increasingly more challenging in terms of recruitment, because you have, just as recently as a few years ago, for-profit institutions made up the bulk of online learners. And now with a lot more traditional institutions entering the fray, you also have Coursera and other MOOC-type initiatives that are playing a big role in online learning. So for me, it's trying to understand how to engage these students to try to help them see the value of what it is that we do.
Okay, great. Thank you. Josh?
Yeah, I think two things I would say. One is defining concepts, and the second is thinking of things from the point of view as a organization, not just as a consumer. In the first, thinking about concepts, these are things that we've all been using forever. I do remember going to the library and pulling things through the card catalog, but I've also been fortunate to live through this, all these ages of technology and get in on the ground floor and now see it at this end. And so I've lived it, but I've always thought of it from either the perspective of a technologist or the perspective of a consumer of resources. So I think thinking of it as a consumer and being able to define all these things that we've always been using anyway has been really useful. To know, oh yeah, there's a name for that thing that I've been doing for a long time. I think that was the most useful for me, because now I know where to go on Google or on other resources to continue to find resources and begin to explore all the different avenues people have researched this.
Okay, great. Prakash, are you back with us? We had lost you for a moment. Hello, Prakash. I can see Prakash. I think he can't hear us now.
Hello.
Oh, Prakash, great. Could you, when you get a chance to hear your introduction, say a bit about yourself?
Yeah. Hello, everyone. Thank you, Professor, for having me here. I'm Prakash. I'm from Mumbai, India. I have completed my BTech in Mechanical Engineering in 2012, and post that I worked in supply chain management and logistics for a couple of years with Larsen & Toubro. I'm not a marketing person to begin with. I mean, so this was something which was very new to me. I just wanted to explore this field. Hence I enrolled for it, and since then I have never looked back. I mean, I've thoroughly enjoyed the course, and the whole structure of course was divided up along the 4 P's of marketing, and the case studies which were given as examples was something which was I was able to learn the concepts and apply them in my real life things, right? So for me, this course was something, being a non-marketeer, still this course made a lot of sense to me, how I as a consumer can make a difference to an organization.
Great. Thank you. Let me ask, Prakash, before I leave you, let me give you a chance to respond to this question. What concepts of the course have you found most interesting?
Since in the beginning I mentioned about supply chain management, 3D printing is a concept which is very closely linked to supply chain management, right? So I believe that how the world will move using the 3D printing concept, and how we can utilize it in our day-to-day life, and this is something which will be very useful, I think, in my days to come.
Great. And didn't we, I think I sent you something that was 3D printed, didn't I?
Yeah, yeah. I don't have it right now because as of now, I,
That was this elephant, right? This elephant that.
yeah, maybe elephant. Yeah.
Okay, great. So let me ask a brief follow-up question. We talked about what
Mm-hmm.
you found to be interesting in terms of concepts. Was there anything that that you found to be surprising in terms of that challenge your existing beliefs that you perhaps came away thinking differently about than you did before?
So in the fourth module, the discussion about price, like pay what you want concept. This is something which I haven't heard about before. I mean, I couldn't believe that a customer could pay as per his, I mean, as per his willingness to pay, right? So this was something which is completely new to me, and I feel how this can be used for, like, not for manufactured goods but for digital products, like where the fixed cost of uh, making the products is very low. Not low. I mean, it gets divided over the entire thing, right? So this is something which was very new to me, and I was surprised to know about it.
Okay, great. And let me actually build off your comment, and this will be exclusive announcement here. I mentioned, I believe, in a few weeks ago, a number of learners are asking if we have PowerPoints for the lecture topics. And actually, we don't, because what happened is when I shot the videos, there were no PowerPoints. Much of this is new material that I've never taught before. And so we built graphics onto the slides, but there were no, for most of these lectures, there were no PowerPoint slides to begin with. So what I've been doing over the past couple of months is working on a new ebook. And the ebook will incorporate the text of the lectures, graphics, list of references, and some additional new material. And one of the questions is, what should be the price of something like this, right? If anything. So what I've decided to do is to, practice what I preach, which I don't normally do, but to practice what I preach and actually post the ebook using Pay What You Want. And so people can pay something or nothing, depending on what what value they find. So it'll be an interesting experiment here. Another example of Pay What You Want, and I'm hoping to get this launched within the next month or so. So stay tuned. I'll make an announcement. Okay, moving on. How about you, Josh? Anything that caught you by surprise?
Surprise. What caught me by surprise? I think some of the follow-up to some of the things I think we had heard about Pay What You Want, and I'd heard about co-development, but finding some of the follow-up in the research was I thought really intriguing. I actually found through the work that we did in class, I found a follow-up study that Harvard put out about the Pay What You Want, or Harvard, maybe the teaching college at Harvard, someone at Harvard had put out about this specific case and compared it to a Nine Inch Nails album that came out after, and looked at what the long-term implications were, right? And what was interesting was to see a lot of these some of these seem like flash-in-the-pan ideas, and some of them aren't, some of them staying power. And because now there's time, 2007 to now, that was 8 years ago, that's kind of crazy to remember. I remember it being all over the news, but now we can look back on it and say, man, that was successful, but it only worked that one time, right? It has to be for a short period of time, and maybe that was the only time it's going to really work in that genre of music, because they were the ones to get it. So I think some of the results of really the research that all the things that we learned made us go out and do, I think that was what was most useful. And frankly, for anyone out there who's considering taking the class, I think it was going out and doing that extra research. That's what really makes the class. I mean, the stuff we learn, the quizzes, that's great, and you can pass the course and come by with pretty good knowledge. But if you really to deepen it and go out and do more research and really put more into those assignments, I found was the most helpful part, and what was the most surprising to me, I think, about the thing.
Yeah, and thank you for doing that, Josh. I know that you've, along with some of the other learners, have shared a lot of the research that you've uncovered, both within the course discussion forums, but also on our social media sites. I think you're our most active LinkedIn contributor. So thank you for your contributions. Clearly, we produce this content at a point in time, but the world keeps changing. So it's really great that, and then because of the cost of developing these videos, the university won't let me reshoot every 2 weeks.
Of course.
So it's really you guys that keep the content fresh. So thank you so much for that.
Which is interesting, really quickly. Isn't there tinkering we're doing a little bit of, right? Maybe some submitting. So it's fascinating that, again, the MOOC concept I think Gabe was talking about for learning. All this marketing stuff also applies in the learning world, in the behavior world, in other fields, and I think that's really fascinating. So everyone benefits from taking this class, I think.
Well, thank you. That was a great point. Gabe, anything that caught you by surprise?
Yeah, for me, it was the effect of the Doppelganger brand image. I used to just think that people would look at that and say, oh, that's satire, and just kind of laugh it off and move on, and companies might get a little laugh out of it and say, oh, wow, look at that, that's clever. But, actually, when I was doing some research about this, I found this one article that said that Doppelganger brand images can actually be some companies' biggest fears, and that more often than we think about, that consumers tend to actually confuse these images with that of the actual brand. So they think the brand is behind this, and so they get offended, and it actually can have an adverse impact. So, I looked at it, it went in an instant, it went from thinking, oh, this is just a joke, and people moving on, to people really looking at this and being offended, and then companies taking such a profound interest in trying to prevent the Doppelganger brand image from happening in the first place.
Yeah, actually, that's, I think, a great segue to maybe we can now move on to some of the questions that have been posted here on the Hangout by some of our learners, and I'd like to get maybe a first crack and have you guys chime in. So, building off what Gabe just talked about, we have a question from Zenyak Coach. Let me try to select this. And if you can see that, it should appear on the top of your screen, at least the top of my screen on the upper right-hand side. So Zenab says, would you please tell me if a doppelganger image could be positive? Well, before answering that, let me briefly perhaps talk about what a doppelganger brand image is. So it's a term that I had coined along with some of my collaborators when I was at the University of Wisconsin nearly a decade ago. We published an article in Digital Marketing in 2006 that established this concept. And essentially what a doppelganger brand image, or a DBI, is, it's a set of disparaging images. It could be both actual images but also verbal images that users and generally folks on the internet, bloggers, usually individuals, but sometimes corporations, they create an alternative image about a brand that is less than favorable. And so that's the term. Doppelganger is a German term, means double walker, and this idea that all of us have an alter ego. So it's a negative alter ego about a brand. So by definition, a doppelganger brand image is something that is not good. Most companies wouldn't want to have it. But I think in answer to this question, it can be positive, and we argue in our 2006 Journal Marketing article that it can be valuable in the sense of providing a early warning detection for firms. That in our case, we look at the Starbucks doppelganger brand image that occurred around 10 years ago. And if Starbucks had caught that early, perhaps they could have avoided some of the negative effects that had happened around 2006, 2007. They closed a number of stores. They had a lot of negative press. And so perhaps monitoring these cues could provide early warning. And that's actually one thing that came out of our research after we had published this work. And I don't talk about this in the class, but after this had been published in January 2006, the American Marketing Association did a profile of our research in October of that year. It was a cover story of their newsletter called Marketing News. And somehow this had gotten on Howard Schultz's desk, and he was the founder of Starbucks, and actually had stepped down, but was still actively involved in the company. So in 2007, on February 14th, there was a memo called, and famously, the Valentine's Day memo, which was leaked that Howard Schultz had written to Starbucks top executives, to the C-suite, saying that we have lost our way, and used terms such as, we become a cookie-cutter brand, we lack authenticity, and pretty much the same things we talked about in our article. And so as a result of that, one of the outcomes that had happened subsequently, about 18 months later, Starbucks had actually launched mystarbucksidea.com. And I believe that was launched in many ways as a way to detect, as a site to collect insights of potential doppelganger threats. And I think that's been very useful for Starbucks as a way to deflect it. One of the beautiful things about this website is that for those of you who have participated in this exercise, if you're like most people, your suggestions met with a lot of negative comments, probably a lot of thumbs down, because people on this website don't like new ideas, for the most part. But interestingly, nobody really seems to blame Starbucks for it. They blame these mean people on the website, like Java Chicky 68, or those sorts of people. And so as a result, Starbucks gets to collect these negative images on this website, potential doppelganger brand images, but doesn't get in trouble for them because they're being deflected. So when you post this potential, disparaging concern about Starbucks, you have a host of Starbucks loyalists telling you how awful your idea is. So I think that's a great example of how strategically a firm can use this concept, or knowledge of this concept, to engage in proactive strategic management. I don't know if anyone else has any thoughts about that, about the upside of the DBI, or other thoughts about doppelganger brand images?
Well, I do have a question about the Starbucks community. So, you say it's advantageous in the sense that it helps them combat some of the doppelganger brand images, but it seemed to me that in a way there was so much negative feedback there. I wonder what that was doing to shape consumers' perception of Starbucks. Because I was just amazed. One thing that really struck me was just how much negative content was there, and just the fact that it was just sitting there for so long and it wasn't even filtered out.
Yeah, that's a really good point. There is a lot of negativity there. Now, when I've looked at, certainly not all, but many of the exercises that our learners have posted, and very few seem to take away a negative impression. That's one of the questions we asked, right, in the exercise. And very few have a negative impression about Starbucks. And when I use the exercise, when I taught this in a physical class, a class of, say, 50 students, and we did the exercise, and I asked them who has a negative impression of Starbucks as a result, very few people came away with that impression. It says, not Starbucks' fault that there's all these jerks on the website, right? But clearly, it's the website itself is not a good example of how to reward user contributions, right? Which is another topic in the course. So look at some of the other sites that do similar things, such as Jones Soda, for example, Dell Idea Storm. Very few of them allow for negative votes. So what's really unique about the Starbucks web, mystarbucksidea.com, is it allows this thumbs down, this negative vote, which is quite uncommon. So if I was giving advice in terms of how to design a user contribution system, my advice would be to allow positive votes, but not negative ones. Anyone else have any thoughts about this topic, Josh or Prakash?
Well, I was just going to say, I think it's interesting how the one thought that kept going through my mind when I was thinking about doppelgangers was the Book of Mormon, the big musical, which seems like a huge co-opted right, doppelganger. That then the Book of Mormon had a whole marketing campaign about how do we counter or accept. The Church of Latter-day Saints rather had a whole marketing campaign around how do we deal with this huge doppelganger brand, which has won enormous Tonys, right? Now it's selling a bunch. It's probably going to run for a long time, make the investors a lot of money, bring a lot of attention to people, the South Park creators who are already sort of not on the naughty list of several organizations. So that was just one thought that kept coming to my mind. Is the question is it positive? And I kept thinking, well, maybe be interesting to think about, like, are there people co-opting their doppelganger back? But certainly it can be positive for other organizations who jump on the train and sort of market off of it. So I think that's something that's fascinating. It doesn't just hurt the brand, it can help another brand almost.
Sure, that's a good point. Good point. Prakash, do you have any thoughts about that? No? Okay. We can move on. Let's see here. What other questions do we have? We have a number of questions. Many by Josh, but Josh is here so he can ask his questions directly. Let's see. There's an interesting question here by Serenity Smile. Great name. So let me put up Serenity's question. And it's, how is digital marketing different from traditional marketing? And that's a really big question. Now, I guess one answer would be, well, that's what the course is really about. So you take the course and find out. But in a more compact, perhaps a more direct answer, I would say that there are, I think, three key differences between digital marketing and traditional marketing, or really, I think, as Josh was suggesting, digital anything and traditional anything. Now, if you think about, I think about a market economy, which is what marketing is all about, market-based economies, that there are three key elements. You have a buyer, which is oftentimes a consumer or customer. You have a seller, which has traditionally been a firm, often a very large firm, and there's something that's transacted between the two. And we typically think about a product, for example. And I think that the movement from traditional to digital marketing is challenging all three elements. All three elements. Let me talk about that briefly. So first of all, the product, which has been traditionally a physical product, is now becoming digital. And as Prakash talked about, one of the most interesting examples is 3D printing, where we can now take we can take ideas, turn them into objects, and take objects and turn them into ideas. So, why do we need a FedEx truck or a UPS truck when we can email a product in the future, for example? So products are changing their form. Not only are they easier to transport, but we know that digital things are much easier to alter, to remix, to modify than physical things. So just like we see remixed music, we may see remixed products. So I don't know about you guys, but I'm a big fan of Apple. My Apple, huge Apple version 6 phone here. I don't know about you. I love Apple, but Apple never asks me what I want in my phone, right? And neither does Samsung for my refrigerators or TVs, and BMW doesn't ask what I want in my car. So they use things like market research to determine what we may want. Now, when we can create or modify our own products, we don't need to ask that question, right? So the product shift is dramatic. Also, the role of the customer. So once we enable things to become digital, as a customer, we take a more active role, potentially a more active role, in terms of modifying a product. So, for example, one of the cool things that has happened fairly recently was talk briefly about the Nokia case, which is a case I've been studying recently. And literally, it is a case. So Nokia, which at one point in time was the world's #1 cell phone provider, was a late mover to the smartphone category. So they've been playing catch-up. So they launched a Lumia line of phones. I believe it was around 2000 and perhaps 13, around that time frame, 2012. And they had catching up to do. So one of the things that Nokia tried to do is to engage users in the creation experience. So on the Lumina 820 phone, it has a removable case. So unlike this phone with this kind of boring case, the Lumina phone has a case that can be removed, and they have different types of cases that can be added. Like with extra battery chargers, and so forth. So they've actually posted on Thingiverse. I don't know if you guys have seen this yet, but on Thingiverse, if you type in Nokia 820 and also the Nokia 520, they posted the design, the basic template for their case, and allowed users to remix the case. So the basic default case has a hexagonal pattern, and it says Nokia in futuristic font. And you can take that, you can change the pattern, you can take out Nokia's name, you can put in your name. And so now it's allowing the customer not just to, what I would say, choose and use products, but to take an active role in co-creating the product physically. So that's new. So we have changing products, changing role of customers, and finally, and I think perhaps most revolutionary, what digital marketing does, it challenges the preeminence of firms. Just as we saw when music became digitized, we saw massive closing of record stores, a dramatic change in the recorded music industry. We might see the same thing in physical product categories with 3D printing, for example, in which basically when you democratize the creation process through digitization, firms become less relevant. So that's the reason why many folks are saying 3D printing perhaps would bring a new industrial revolution and change the basic fabric of our economy. So in my view, that's really the essence of what's changing. Is changing what digitization is doing, and we're just in the beginning stages of this, still at the early stages, is changing the basic foundations of our economy, changing products, changing the role of customers, and changing the dominance of firms. So, we can very well that, for you young guys, Josh, for example, you might have in 40 years your grandkids saying to you, Grandpa, tell us about the old days when you would go to stores and buy things made by big companies. And they said, do people really do that? Why didn't you just make it at home? Why would you go out in the snow and travel to the store and pick it up? What was wrong with you guys? So that's a few thoughts. I know it's kind of far out there, but I think it represents not just the ability to send text or to Facebook, but something even more fundamental. And those are cool things, but more fundamental in changing the basic nature of our economy. Not yet, but perhaps in 15, 20, 30 years. And to me, that's both exciting but also scary. As someone who is a digital immigrant, I'll be 50 years old in a couple months. That's something that I'm trying to grapple with myself. So I don't know if you guys have any thoughts about that. Is that too far out there?
No, I was actually going to ask you. You said this is too far off topic. You said democratizing, products through 3D printing will make retailers irrelevant. And I'm curious, just sort of widening this. You guys at University of Illinois are creating a MOOC IMBA right now. You're launching it. It's getting some press. I assume you're involved in some capacity in your many positions at the university. And I'm curious, one of the ideas of MOOCs is to democratize the learning, right? And you guys are taking a step in that. And it reminds me of the old saying that in business you must make yourself irrelevant before your competitors do. I'm curious, as you guys embark, and we're talking about digital marketing, and you also are using digital education, digital everything, right? Curious from your point of view of creating and marketing this product, and also using it, as you said, like your book, you're going to do a pay-as-you-go, right? You're using a lot of the co-creation stuff. You said you want us to send you stuff back to change the class. The marketing is overlapping with this class. I'm curious if you have any insight or thoughts on that from the perspective of this course specifically, and how you marketed it, not just this course, but the entire MBA, and perhaps MOOCs in general, and what that says about democratization and et cetera. It seems like an interesting parallel.
Yeah, that's a really good question. I have lots of thoughts. Without being too verbose, there's a number of interesting things happening in the world of higher education, which you guys are involved in, like Josh and Gabe, that if you look at least in this country, in the United States, over the past 30 years, since I was a college student, that the cost of higher education has gone up faster than the cost of healthcare. And that was a huge, right, a huge issue for the Obama administration to tackle, the healthcare crisis. And we're essentially, I think, at the beginning of perhaps in the middle of a higher education crisis. Other indications of this is in this country, we have higher levels of student loan debt than credit card debt. We have many of my friends who are physicians are telling their kids not to become doctors because of the cost of medical school. And we have also, for the first time ever, we have articles in magazines, newspapers, billboards, question the value of higher education. When I graduated high school in 1983, it was a no-brainer that any higher education that you got was going to pay off in the end. And now we're starting to really question that basic assumption. And so if you think about it, we're almost in this perfect storm of a higher education bubble. We have runaway cost, we have increasing debt, and now, you know, just recently, Coursera was launched 3 years ago, the advent of a new low-cost competitor. And what's really interesting about what we're doing at Illinois, and not just us, but you know, schools like Duke, Virginia, of course Stanford, Yale. How are we facing this challenge? So think about this: you have this entrenched, established industry. There's a joke that if Benjamin Franklin awoke today and started walking around the earth, he would be totally at a loss until he stepped inside a college classroom where he'd feel right at home, right? So you have this entrenched industry that's faced with a new low-cost competitor, and what are we doing? We're giving our competitor our content. We're saying, please, just take it, right? Here's take it. So it's really interesting. Either this is mass hysteria, all of us, you know, could be what strategy scholars might call institutional isomorphism. We're all kind of following the leader. It could be. But I really think what's happening is we feel that we don't have a choice, that the world is changing, and that we have this, like you said, Josh, you know, it's, you know, you're going to innovate or die. And there's projections that Rich Lyons, the dean of UC Berkeley Business School, has predicted that within, I believe it's what he said, within 15 years, the majority of MBA programs will close. There'll be a handful of MBA providers, and we're seeing that already. We've seen most recently Wake Forest University has scrapped their full-time, daytime MBA program. And so we're doing something that's really innovative here at the University of Illinois with this new IMBA, which was just passed a few months ago, and will be launched, I believe, within the next 12 months, if everything goes well, and offering this through Coursera platform, a low-cost, the concept is a $20,000 IMBA, which is making a lot of waves in higher education. I think it's a bold experiment, but I really believe that we have no choice. If you think about just about every single industry has been impacted by this digital revolution, and we're one of the few holdouts. So I'm not sure if that answers your question. I didn't mean to go on too long.
I think it's a great case study of sort of how you thought out the process and how you came to it. And I think a lot of organizations, I know everyone's doing the same thing right now. So that's a really interesting case study, if anything. Thank you.
Yeah, and it'll be interesting to see. I think it's a good term, case study, you know, where we end up in 3, 4, 5 years, right? And I tell you, you know, my prediction, and this probably won't be popular among my colleagues here at Illinois, but now, I'm not an economist, but I do believe that you know, the marginal cost of a digital good is pretty close to zero, right? So if you think about what does that mean for an online low-cost MBA, well, we'll have a $20,000 MBA in 2016, and my guess is in 2017 there's somebody with a $15,000 MBA or a $10,000 MBA, right? And so, do you reach a point in which you have a $100 MBA, right? And or 99 cents a lecture? You know, where do we go? So it remains to be seen. But I should point out that this idea wasn't mine. It was hatched by our associate dean for outreach, Raj Echabadi, and I'm really just a content provider. I'm just providing this content for this course. So I'm kind of going along for the ride as well to see where this ends up, and trying to pitch in where I can and help out with this. But that's a really good question. Let me talk about this is another interesting question by Chris. Let me find Chris's question. Let's see if it's still here. I'm scrolling up, trying to find. Let's see that. I think Chris's question may be gone. So where is Chris? Chris is second question. Second from the top. Oh yeah, this is the question is dominant electronic device. Is that the question? Dominant. Oh, here it is. Chris VR. From your experience, which is the dominant electronic device in the digital world in terms of entrepreneurship and innovation? I think, you know, what you guys think about this, but I guess my answer simply would be today that the smartphone, right now, and the whole mobile platforms, and I would say in the future, I would say the 3D printer. But I could be biased since I run a 3D printing lab. How about the panelists? What do you guys think? Prakash, Gabe, Josh? Prakash, okay, Gabe. What do you think, Gabe?
I would definitely vote smartphone. I read recently that the average user checks their smartphone about 150 times a day.
That's me.
So I think, you know, you've got and you have hundreds of millions of smartphone users across the world. So I just think, you know, you have an instant market. The checking these devices at 150 times a day. You multiply that by millions, and you see the scope or reach that a prospective marketer would have.
Yeah, that's a really good point. And I, for many years, I taught during the summer at Korea University in Seoul. I taught in their global MBA program from 2007 to 2012. And as I would take the subway to class, again, you know, this is not even recent, right? 2007, 2012. Everybody was looking at their smartphone, and I wasn't because I didn't have international coverage. So I'm kind of sitting there bored. Everyone's looking at their phone, and it really changes interactions. That's one of the interesting things that that's one of Gabe's questions he had asked. Actually, Josh's question I had written down. Some of the interesting trends that we are not talking about in this class. And I think one of them is from an article I'd read several years ago in the Atlantic Monthly. I don't know if you guys recall this. It was titled, Is Google Making Us Stupid? And it was from a developmental psychologist that was saying that today's young generation who are growing up in this fully digital era, you know, reading news stories online, Googling, you know, Wikipediaing, if that's the term. Actually, the brain is formed differently. The brain's very malleable at early ages, and actually incapable, cognitively, of reading, say, a 3 to 5 page essay. I'm not sure if that's true or not, but the interesting thing is, what is the impact of, you know, we're talking about here, Gabe, 150 times a day at your phone. And will that change the way we think? Our ability to I think we see in the augmented reality video in the class, Alan Craig talks about being sucked into this virtual world. And we see a little bit of that in the student interviews we have on the quad. I think a little bit of that. So that's just something that came to mind. So we see the smartphone, a vote from Gabe. How about you, Josh? Dominant devices.
You know, I don't think it's devices. I think there will always be devices, but I think what makes it really powerful is the cloud itself. Because you said you're looking at your phone 150 times a day. You know, I was fortunate enough to get an iWatch. and I'm still waiting for it to be as amazing, right, as the iPhone is, and it will be once the software is there, which can support bringing that information in from the web. And 5 years after that, there'll be another device, right? Maybe it's something like a Google Glass, or we'll have contacts, who knows? But I don't think it's far off, and I think the devices will keep changing, right? They'll keep morphing, and obviously technologies like 3D printing are huge, and being able to have one in your home is amazing. But 10 years ago, we all thought we'd have huge hard drives in our home, 5 years ago, and that would have all your stuff on it, right? Star Trek, you remember they used to put floppy disks in the replicator. So I think the focus is less on devices for me and more on what you access with those devices, and I think that's where the real, like, that's the sexy stuff for me, is not just the devices, but what all the stuff that we have around us right now, how that feeds the devices and allows them to grow and work. So that would be what I would say.
Okay, thank you. Prakash, what are sort of the dominant electronic devices now and in the future?
Even I agree with you on that, that mobile phone will be one of the dominant devices. The reason I say this is, you see a lot of online selling firms in India, they're moving from e-commerce to m-commerce as on today. I mean, they are closing down their e-commerce website, and because they realize that how easy it is for a customer to purchase anything on the move, right? So I believe that mobile thing in the coming future.
Okay. Let me go to one more question, and we'll close with some closing comments because we're close to the end of our hour in about another 15 minutes. That's a question from Ralph Stauder. And Ralph asks an interesting question. So, like most courses, most business school courses, we talk a lot about bigger companies. Although we talk also about small companies in this class, like Local Motors, for example, or we talk Threadless, for example. But for the most part, most business school classes talk about big companies. So we don't give enough attention to small startups traditionally. So this question has to deal with that. So the question is, how can a young company, without much research or market share, gain knowledge of customers? Let me talk a bit about that. Although I must admit that it's been several decades since I actually worked for a for-profit company, so my knowledge may be a bit dated. But I do have some experience in the sense of, as a startup, even though it's a nonprofit, about 2.5 years ago, my colleague Vishal Sachdev and I started the Illinois Maker Lab, which is featured in the course, and the world's first only 3D printing lab. And we started a very old, small building with a very tiny room and about 5 printers, and we've grown a bit since then. But as a small startup, with our experience, we found that one of the advantages of being a small startup is you really get a chance to know your customers because you don't have very many. So I guess my immediate response to this question of how does a small company get to know their customers, I would say talk to them. Talk to your customers, find out about them, their worldviews, how they use the product. And in some cases, what we see is both small companies and big companies oftentimes don't go the extra mile of living in the customer's shoes. Let me give you one example of that. When I was at Wisconsin, I had the benefit of interacting with a fellow named Scott Cook, who was one of our benefactors at the University of Wisconsin and the founder of Intuit, the large financial services. They do Quicken Loans and TurboTax and things of that nature. And one of the stories that Scott talks about is how when they first launched TurboTax, and they're out in California, they had created a average American tax return. They had to figure out what is the average American tax return in terms of income and deductions and dependents. And it brought a bunch of average Americans into their lab at Intuit in California and had about 20 computers set up, loaded with the TurboTax software, and asked them to file their taxes. And what they found was that, on average, people could do this in about 20 minutes. So they advertised the TurboTax, average American, 20 minutes or less, launched the product. And within a few weeks, they got lots of backlash because nobody could do their taxes in 20 minutes. everybody took a lot longer than that. And what they found is they said, well, something's wrong with our research, so they actually went to people's homes. And they have something into it called the Follow Me Home program. And they followed these people and watched them do their taxes on their computers at their homes and their actual tax returns. And what they found is that when you're at home and it's your money, it's your tax return, you take a lot more time, when you know you could be audited by the IRS, a lot more time studying that very carefully if you're doing some generic tax return, right? And a big company was really at a disadvantage because they're not really in such a need that they need to follow people home. But a small company can do that. So I think there are some advantages of being small, and I would say follow your customers home and talk to them. Right? That would be my basic basic advice. I don't know if you guys have any thoughts about that topic. Prakash?
I would like to add to you, to a point. There is a study recent study which suggests that if a customer is happy with the product, 2 out of 10 times he will post it online. But if he is unhappy or dissatisfied, 8 out of 10 times he will post it online. So that's such an advantage for us as a firm that a customer is posting his feedback and giving us a ways to improve our services or our products. So I think you rightly mentioned it. You need your constant interaction on your social media platforms, Facebook, Twitter, to understand more about customer, their needs, their problems, and come up with innovative products to solve those problems.
I agree. Gabe or Josh?
Well, I think he's absolutely right in saying that you have to be active on social media platforms. I think, and it goes back to authenticity, which was one of the lessons that we learned in the course. And I think you brought up a great point in the course about Domino's and how they came right out and said, yeah, our product was really bad. And I think that if you have a strong social media presence, that gives you a chance to say, hey, this is what we've heard. We've heard people saying these things about our brand or about our product. Well, here's the reality of it. And I think the only way you do that is continually building yourself up in a strong social media base. There is now I'm not an entrepreneur, but I am aware of a website that's called venturehacks.com, and it's a website that's designed to provide advice to prospective entrepreneurs and tries to tell them things about how to be engaged in marketing and how to pick the right people for the organization. So that would be another place you could start as well, just to see what kind of advice others are giving and are following.
Great. Thanks, Gabe. Josh, any thoughts?
Yeah, I was going to say, call up other young companies that are in your market. Maybe they're direct competitors or maybe they're not, but especially if you're starting out, everyone loves talking about themselves. They love talking about their experiences, and if you call someone and ask them to talk and give you feedback and ask for advice, they generally do it. Yep. And you can do that really well at trade organizations, shows where you just walk around and talk to people and see the products. I think that's also really helpful. You see what's new and what's not. So picking up the phone, I think, is the biggest thing, though, to answer that question.
That's a good point. So not just talking to your customers, but talking to your competitors as well, which we do a lot here. So here at the University of Illinois, we share knowledge about, we're doing Coursera with many other universities. And we actually have a group of 10 of us, 10 leading schools in the U.S. who are doing these online massive courses. And once a week there's a conference call where we share what's new. So we talk to Penn has a marketing class, we talk to Penn, and Penn talks to us. And there's lots of information that's exchanged. We have about 5 minutes left. Any final words, final thoughts that you guys have you'd like to share about the course or about interesting things that you're doing or things that you've seen that are not in the course that you'd like to talk about? Prakash?
Well, if I may, I have one thing. I will say, just kind of going off the last point, is to definitely not be afraid to ask other people for advice. Some of the people that I've connected with, either through the course or through on LinkedIn, have been very open and honest, and they're very direct and say, hey, you can tell them, hey, this is the problem that I'm having. Do you have some advice? And it doesn't seem to me, people will talk to you and engage with you irrespective of your industry or anything else. So I've had tremendous success just communicating with people across these platforms and trying to get some advice on how to better things on my end.
Well, great. It's a good example of what Josh was just talking about, right? in action. Josh, you've been sharing a lot online already with the LinkedIn platform.
I hope I'm not oversharing, but you said at the beginning 108,000 views, 38,000 learners, 1,300 graduates so far. That's going to keep growing, and I assume those are communities now that everyone who's a part of the class is a part of. And just like any strong alumni association, any strong network, that's a network as well. And I think to build off Gabe's point, the cool thing is this is really mirroring the globalized society we're entering into, whether it's not-for-profit or for-profit or higher education. And I think availing yourself of your peers in this class is not only helpful for the coursework, but just helpful for networking and all the other stuff. I'm sure there will be many success stories of networking and connections coming out of this class, and I'm eager to revisit this video in 5 years and say, oh, look there, that's where we saw it. So
yeah, we'll see how old I look, how much gray hair I have in 5 years. That's a great point, Josh. Prakash, any closing comments?
Yeah, I'm just thankful that I was given this opportunity to learn this course. I mean, because staying in I would thank Coursera and University of Illinois Urbana-Champaign and of course you, because I never thought that I could learn digital marketing so easily in a very structured manner. So I'm just thankful, and I'm hoping that because I'm doing my MBA as of now, which will be there for next 2 years. So once I finish my MBA and how I utilize these concepts in my day-to-day life and in even my corporate life. So I'm waiting for that. But even meanwhile, I believe I'll be using these concepts as a consumer, not as an organization, but I'll see how things proceed for me.
Great. Well, that's a nice segue. Likewise, I'm very thankful for you guys in particular, but for all of our learners. It's been so far, just 2 months, but a really fabulous learning experience for me. For me, it was a lot of first time teaching online, first time teaching digital marketing, first time doing a Google Hangout. So a lot of firsts for me, and I think one of the best things about education, no matter which side of the fence you're on, that gives you a chance to learn new things. And there's nothing cooler than learning new things, right? And having new stories to tell. And every day when I look at the discussion boards, I find new stories. And just one quick example, and I apologize, I forgot the name of the person who posted this, but it was a discussion on Module 4 about pay what you want. And we had talked a bit about, in the course, some examples. And this person actually said, well, perhaps there's, as a discussion about pay what you want and trying to sort through it on the discussion board, someone came out and said perhaps there's different types of pay what you want, different variations. Let a typology of I believe 5 different types of pay what you want strategies, such as auctions, for example, types that we actually would name a suggested price, types where you wouldn't name any price at all. And that was a really rich, a simple typology, but very rich, and actually an advance of the academic research. The academics are just looking at one type. So that's a tremendous insight. And every day there are stories, like this. So for me, it's a very unique and wonderful learning experience, and I'm just really thankful to have the opportunity. And I look forward to engaging in the coming months and hopefully years with you guys. Hope you stay engaged in the course and our other learners. And in terms of things to stay tuned for, again, we got the ebook hopefully coming out soon. Other concepts I have in mind are doing perhaps a co-created T-shirt design for the class. Still thinking about that, but I know we have some talented people, so perhaps we can design, collaborate, and do a local motors type of or a threadless type of co-creation for a class T-shirt. That'd be kind of cool. I like T-shirts. And a third thing, I'm also looking to refresh the course by adding some new content, and we're thinking about now is having some academic experts around different schools around the world who would add some content, some new video to the class. So those who have finished the class are reason to come on back and see what's fresh. And hopefully we'll have something posted by the end of the summer, with the idea of maybe doing one of these a month. So those are some things we're thinking about. But if anyone has other ideas of how we can make this course better, please, let us know. This is certainly, a work in progress. I think of a good initial launch, but certainly we can make it even better. So thanks so much, guys. Thanks for staying up late and getting up early. And look forward to seeing you online and in class. Okay.
Thank you.
Okay, thanks, guys.
Thanks.
Okay, take care.
Thank
Bye.
you.